The Sin-Eater of Rampart Street, a true cryptid encounter from Mardi Gras in New Orleans. New Orleans is alive. Not just the way people talk about a city being alive, full of culture and history. It's something more than that. There's a pulse beneath the cobblestone streets. Something old, something watching. I didn't feel it at first. We had come for Mardi Gras. Just like thousands of others, drinking and dancing our way through the French Quarter, soaking in the neon lights and brass band music. It felt like a dream, like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen, until we left the crowd. It was after 2 a.m., and the quarter was starting to settle down. Beads littered the ground, abandoned masks fluttered in the gutters, and the air was thick with sweat, spilled liquor, and something damp and mossy that didn't belong. That's when we made the wrong turn onto Rampart Street. At first, it just seemed quieter, a relief from the chaos. Too quiet, in hindsight. Then we saw her. She stood in the middle of the road, wrapped in layers of black cloth, almost like mourning attire. Her skin was grayish, sagging around her cheeks, as if she'd been drained of life. And her eyes, pure white, no pupils, no irises, just milky and empty. We should have walked the other way, but we didn't. She tilted her head slightly, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. Then she spoke. "I see the weight on your souls." Her voice wasn't like an old woman's. It was too deep, too layered, like there was someone else speaking underneath her words, whispering in tandem. Drew laughed, still buzzed from the night. "Yeah, okay, lady." She didn't react, just lifted her hand, fingers too long, too thin, and pointed at each of us, one by one. Kat tensed beside me. "Let's go." The moment her finger landed on me, I felt it, a pressure in my chest, like something invisible had reached inside and grabbed hold. My breath hitched, and for a moment, the world around me warped. The streetlights dimmed, the air grew thick, and I could hear something whispering just beyond the edge of sound. I spun around. No one was there. We started walking faster, the air pressing down like a thunderstorm about to break. The old woman's voice followed us, her whisper slithering through the empty street. "Sin carries a scent, you reek of it." A gust of wind blew through the street, warm and rotting, carrying the scent of something deep, wet, and wrong. I glanced back. She was still there, still watching. The further we walked, the worse I felt. It wasn't just the alcohol anymore. My stomach twisted like I'd eaten something rotten. My arms felt heavy. My vision blurred at the edges, and every step made me feel like I was sinking into the street. Drew stumbled. "Jesus, I feel sick." "We're almost there," I muttered, though I didn't know if that was true. Then we heard it. A crack. A wet, snapping sound. Kat turned around first, and the way she gasped, it wasn't just fear. It was something worse. I followed her gaze and saw the old woman change. Her spine curved violently, like her bones were snapping apart and reforming at unnatural angles. Her arms stretched, the skin tearing and reforming like clay being reshaped. Her jaw unhinged, widening impossibly, stretching downward as if there was no limit. But it wasn't just the way she looked. It was the feeling. The air shimmered around her, like the heat that rises from asphalt on a summer day. But instead of warmth, it carried a deep, suffocating cold. A cold that settled into my bones, into my mind. And then, the whispers started. They weren't coming from her. They were coming from everywhere. The alleyways, the doorways of the darkened buildings, the ground beneath us. Hundreds of voices overlapping, speaking all at once. Some laughing, some crying, some pleading. And the worst part? I recognized them. It was our voices. Every conversation we'd had that night. Every sin we'd committed. The lies, the cheating, the things we thought no one saw. They were being repeated back to us in a nightmarish, distorted echo. Drew's voice. Dude, we're not paying that bill. Just run. Kat's voice. Whatever, it's just a little coke. Everyone's doing it. My own voice. It's just for fun. No one gets hurt. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The old woman, or whatever she was now, took a step toward us. Her mouth was still stretching, wider and wider, as if it was preparing to swallow the world whole. Kat screamed. That broke me free. Run! We bolted. The whispers followed. The air warped, making the street seem longer, like we were running in place. I could feel something right behind me. Its breath on my neck, cold and wet. Then, we crossed back into the quarter. And suddenly, everything was normal again. The lights were bright. The street was alive with drunk tourists, stumbling partiers, and neon signs. The air was warm again. I turned back. Rampart Street was empty. No old woman, no shifting shadows, no whispers, just silence. We made it to our hotel, panting and drenched in sweat. The doorman saw us and frowned. He didn't ask what happened. He just shook his head and said, "You met the Sin-Eater." My stomach dropped. "What the hell does that mean?" I demanded. He just sighed, looking at us like we were already ghosts. "She don't take lives. She takes sins. What's left of you afterward? That ain't my business." I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't been back to New Orleans since. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I hear it again. The whispers, and I swear, they know my name.